In March 2020, Sarah Mitchell walked out of her locked Lima hostel room and left everything behind. Her passport sat in the room safe, her phone charged on the bedside table, her backpack, her wallet. Her entire identity remained untouched in a space secured from the inside. 18 months later, her mother saw her face in a stranger's YouTube video. Sarah was alive, visibly pregnant, wearing traditional Andean dress in a village so remote it didn't appear on most maps. Speaking fluent Quechua, a language she'd never studied, never heard, never encountered in her carefully documented life in suburban Oregon. When authorities reached the village, Sarah looked at her own parents without recognition. She called herself Sumaq. She insisted with absolute conviction that she had lived in that mountain community her entire life. Her husband, a local farmer, produced a wedding certificate dated April 2019, 8 months before Sarah Mitchell supposedly vanished. Dental records confirmed what her parents already knew. This was their daughter, the same girl who texted them from the Lima hostel the night before she disappeared. But psychological evaluation revealed something more disturbing than deception. Sarah Mitchell genuinely believed she was Sumaq. No traumatic amnesia, no signs of coercion or brainwashing, no indication that she was lying, and the village confirmed her story. Elderly residents produced photographs, faded images allegedly showing Sumaq as a child, playing in that same plaza, standing beside buildings that had existed for decades. Sarah's parents brought her back to Oregon. 3 weeks later, she vanished again. This time she left a note in perfect Quechua script. "I'm going home." This is the story of a woman who disappeared twice, once from everything she knew, and once from everyone who knew her. Sarah Mitchell turned 20 on February 14th, 2020. Her parents threw her a small party at their Portland home. Close friends, her younger brother. Her childhood dog sprawled across the couch. In the photographs from that evening, she's laughing, wearing the scarf her grandmother had sent from Michigan, surrounded by luggage she'd been packing for weeks. She left for South America 9 days later. The trip had been planned for over a year. Sarah had deferred her college enrollment, worked 2 jobs throughout her senior year of high school, saved methodically. She'd mapped out a route through 6 countries, booked hostels, researched bus routes, learned basic Spanish through an app she used religiously every morning. Her mother kept a shared Google Doc where Sarah logged every booking confirmation, every planned destination, every hostel address. She wasn't reckless. She was prepared. The plan was simple: 3 months moving south through Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia. She'd started a blog, posted photos from Cartagena's colorful streets, from a cloud forest hostel in Mindo, from the night she'd watched the sunset over the Pacific in Montañita. Her entries were detailed, enthusiastic, filled with the kind of observations that come from someone genuinely paying attention to the world. Her last blog post was dated March 7th, 2020. She just arrived in Lima. "The hostel's in Miraflores," she wrote, "right near the cliffs overlooking the ocean. My room is tiny but clean. Bunk bed, shared bathroom down the hall, a window that doesn't quite close all the way so you can hear the city all night. There's a German couple in the room next to mine who've been traveling for 8 months. They gave me tips about Cusco. I'm taking a bus there in 2 days." She never took that bus. March 9th, 2020. The hostel owner knocked on Sarah's door at checkout time. No answer. He knocked again an hour later. Then again at 2 p.m., when her reservation officially ended. He used his master key. The room looked lived in but abandoned. Sarah's backpack sat on the lower bunk, partially unpacked. Her phone was plugged into the wall charger. Battery full, screen dark. Her passport was in the room's small safe, which remained locked. the code still set to whatever she'd chosen. A paperback novel lay face down on the pillow. Her toiletry bag sat on the bathroom sink. The window that didn't quite close was open, just a few inches, enough to hear the street below. The hostel owner checked the bathroom, the shared spaces, the rooftop terrace. He asked the staff. No one had seen her leave. The front desk worker remembered seeing her the previous evening. She'd returned around 9 p.m., gone straight upstairs, said goodnight in Spanish that was accented but clear. Security footage from the hostel's entrance showed Sarah entering at 8:47 p.m. on March 8th. She wore jeans, a green jacket, carried a small crossbody bag. She smiled at the camera, the automatic smile of someone who knows they're being recorded. She never appeared on that footage again. The camera ran continuously. It covered the only entrance and exit. There was no back door, no fire escape, no other way out of the building that didn't pass through that camera's frame. Between 8:47 p.m. on March 8th and 11 a.m. on March 9th, when the owner discovered her empty room, Sarah Mitchell did not leave the hostel. But she wasn't there. The hostel owner called the Peruvian National Police at 3:30 p.m. Sarah's parents received a call from the U.S. Embassy in Lima at 11 p.m. Oregon time. Her mother answered. Her father took the phone when she couldn't speak. Their daughter had disappeared from a locked room. Everything she needed to exist in the world, her identity, her money, her communication devices, remained behind. The window that didn't quite close overlooked a busy street 3 stories down. No ledge, no way to climb. Even if she'd somehow descended, the security camera covered the sidewalk below. She would have been visible. The Peruvian police treated it as a missing person case. They interviewed the hostel, staff, the other guests, reviewed the security footage, frame by frame. They checked hospitals, morgues, police stations. They contacted bus companies, airlines, border crossings. Sarah's face appeared on local news, in expat Facebook groups, on missing person databases that stretched across South America. Her parents flew to Lima within 48 hours. Her father stood in that small hostel room, staring at her backpack, her phone, the novel she'd been reading. Her mother went through everything methodically, checking pockets, looking for notes, searching for any indication of where her daughter might have gone or why. They found nothing, no explanation, no plan, no reason for a prepared, careful young woman to walk away from everything that made her exist. The search expanded. Volunteers combed parks, beaches, neighborhoods. Peruvian authorities pursued every lead, reported sightings, possible matches, rumors. All of them dissolved into nothing. March became April. April became summer. The world locked down as COVID-19 spread, and international searches became nearly impossible. Sarah's parents remained in Lima for 5 weeks before returning to Oregon, leaving behind contact information, money for a continued investigation, desperate pleas for anyone who knew anything. The blog went silent. Her Instagram account stopped updating. The shared Google Doc her mother checked obsessively remained frozen on that last entry. Miraflores Hostel, March 7th. By the end of 2020, the active search had effectively ended. Sarah Mitchell's case remained open, but dormant. Another young traveler who'd vanished in a foreign country. Another file in an overwhelmed system. Another family waiting beside a phone that never rang. Her room in Portland stayed exactly as she'd left it before her trip. Her mother couldn't bring herself to change anything. The immediate search lasted 6 weeks. The sustained search lasted 4 months. The hope lasted longer, but it was hope stretched so thin it became transparent. Sarah's father, David Mitchell, took family medical leave from his engineering job and didn't go back. Her mother, Rebecca, worked from home when she could focus, which was rarely. Their younger son, Michael, 16 when Sarah disappeared, stopped talking about his sister in present tense somewhere around month 7. A shift his parents noticed, but couldn't bear to acknowledge. The U.S. Embassy in Lima assigned a case officer, a competent woman named Patricia Vega, who'd handled dozens of missing American cases, who knew exactly how to balance empathy with realism. She called the Mitchells every 2 weeks for the first 3 months, then monthly, then every 6 weeks. The Peruvian National Police investigation followed standard protocol. They'd checked everything systematically. Sarah's financial records showed no activity after March 8th. Her phone, when finally unlocked with help from her parents, revealed nothing unusual. Her last text had been to her mother at 8:15 p.m. Just got back to the hostel. Walked around Miraflores tonight. It's beautiful here. Love you. Her email showed booking confirmations for hostels she never reached, research about Machu Picchu, a draft message to a friend back home describing her trip so far. Nothing suggested planning, distress, or contact with anyone who might explain her disappearance. The security footage remained the central mystery. Investigators brought in specialists to review it, frame by frame. No tampering, no gaps, no technical malfunction. The camera had recorded continuously, and Sarah Mitchell simply never walked past it after entering at 8:47 p.m. 3 theories emerged in those first months, each one inadequate. First, she'd left the hostel through some route they'd missed. But the building had been examined thoroughly. The window in her room opened to a sheer drop. The roof was accessible only through a locked door, and the key hung in the owner's office. The neighboring buildings weren't close enough to reach. The camera covered every angle of the entrance. Second, she'd left voluntarily, possibly meeting someone, possibly experiencing a crisis. But her passport remained in the safe. Her money was untouched. Her phone, her entire identity stayed behind. Even someone in acute psychological distress typically takes something. She'd taken nothing. Third, someone had removed her from that room, but there was no evidence of forced entry, no signs of struggle, no indication that anyone else had been in that space. The door had been locked from the inside. The hostel owner had to use his master key to open it. By month 6, the investigation had effectively stalled. Not closed, but paused indefinitely. Patricia Vega stopped promising active leads. Rebecca Mitchell took over completely. She joined Facebook groups for families of missing persons. She learned about international databases, about the complexities of cross-border investigations, about the thousands of people who vanish each year and simply never resurface. She created a website dedicated to Sarah's case. She contacted travel bloggers, expat communities, anyone with connections in South America. She became an expert in absence. The Mitchells learned things no parent should have to know. That most missing person cases are solved quickly or not at all. That adult disappearances receive less attention than child abductions. That international cases face jurisdictional tangles, language barriers, resource limitations. That suspicious circumstances means very little without evidence of actual crime. They learned that hope is not a sustainable resource. Sarah's case appeared in several true crime forums. Amateur investigators proposed theories: human trafficking, voluntary disappearance, cult recruitment, murder with sophisticated body disposal. Some theories were thoughtful. Most were speculation, piled on speculation. None led anywhere. The 6-month mark came and went. Then a year. March 20th to 21 arrived, and Sarah had been gone exactly 12 months. The Mitchells held a small memorial service, though calling it that felt like surrender. They called it a remembrance gathering. Friends came. People cried. No one knew what to say. Media attention had evaporated by then. A missing college student had been news in March 2020, but only briefly, and then the entire world had other concerns. By 2021, Sarah Mitchell's disappearance was old news, just another tragic, unsolved case. Rebecca still checked her email obsessively. She'd set up alerts for Sarah's name, for keywords that might indicate a lead. Mostly, she got notifications about other missing persons, other families searching, the vast network of absence that exists just beneath normal life. Patricia Vega called in April 2021, not with news, just to check in, to maintain contact, to acknowledge the anniversary. She was kind, she was also honest. Without new evidence, without a credible sighting, without something to pursue, the case couldn't move forward. "I haven't given up," she told Rebecca. "The file stays open. If anything comes up, anything at all, we'll follow it immediately." It was the best she could offer. David Mitchell stopped looking at the website Rebecca maintained. He couldn't stand seeing his daughter's face frozen at age 20. Couldn't bear reading the same hopeful appeals that never generated results. He returned to work in May 2021, moving through his days with mechanical precision, focusing on problems that had solutions. Michael graduated high school that June. Sarah should have been there. The absence was so obvious it became visible, a sister-shaped hole in every family photo. By September 2021, 18 months after Sarah's disappearance, the Mitchells had entered a permanent state of unresolved grief. Not mourning exactly, because mourning implies an ending. Just endless waiting beside a silence that never broke. Rebecca still maintained the website, still checked her alerts, still answered emails from strangers who thought they might have seen something. Every lead dissolved. Every possible sighting turned out to be someone else. She was sitting at her kitchen table on September 23rd, 2021, scrolling through her daily alerts, when she saw the email subject line, "I think I saw your daughter." She'd seen that subject line hundreds of times. It had never been real before. This time was different. Sarah Mitchell is not missing anymore. Officially, she's been found. She exists in a remote Andean village, living as Sumaq, raising a child embedded in a community that claims she's always belonged to them. Her dental records confirm her identity. Her physical presence is undeniable. But to her parents, to everyone who knew Sarah Mitchell, she remains profoundly lost. This case doesn't end with answers. It ends with questions that undermine everything we think we understand about identity, memory, and the self. How does someone forget 20 years of existence so completely that they believe a different history entirely? How does a village produce childhood photographs of someone who shouldn't have been there? How does a wedding certificate predate a disappearance? The medical explanations fall short. Dissociative fugue states don't account for fluent language acquisition. Traumatic amnesia doesn't explain the documentary evidence of a prior life. Folie à plusieurs, shared delusion, doesn't typically involve dozens of people across generations maintaining perfect consistency. What happened in the gap between Sarah's last text message and the morning her hostel room stood empty? Where was she during those 18 months before the travel blogger's video? And more unsettling, where was she before March 2020 if the 2019 wedding certificate is authentic? The Mitchells visit Peru twice a year now. They stay in a small hotel 3 hours from the village where their daughter lives. Sometimes Sumaq agrees to see them, though she doesn't understand why these Americans keep coming, why they look at her with such desperate recognition. She's polite but confused. She humors them. They bring photographs from Sarah's childhood. Sumaq looks at them like artifacts from someone else's life. She doesn't remember the dog, the house, the brother, the birthday parties. She sees a stranger who happens to share her face. The Peruvian authorities have closed the missing person case. Sarah Mitchell has been located. That she doesn't remember being Sarah Mitchell is, ultimately, not a criminal matter. There's no resolution here, no explanation that accounts for all the evidence. No way to reconcile two complete lives that shouldn't be able to coexist in one person. Perhaps the most haunting aspect isn't what we don't know. It's the possibility that Sarah Mitchell and Sumaq are both real. That somewhere in the mechanism of identity, in memory, consciousness, the continuous sense of self we assume is fixed. There's a fluidity we don't understand. That a person can be genuinely missing from one life while being exactly where they belong in another. The note Sarah left when she disappeared from Oregon the second time now sits in Rebecca Mitchell's desk drawer. 3 words in Quechua script. I'm going home. But which home? And who decides? March 2021, 18 months after Sarah Mitchell's disappearance. A travel vlogger named Marcus Chen uploaded a 23-minute video titled "The Village Time Forgot, 72 Hours in the Peruvian Andes." Chen specialized in remote communities, untouched by mass tourism. His channel had accumulated a modest following, 60,000 subscribers drawn to his unhurried documentation of vanishing cultures. The video featured sweeping shots of terraced mountainsides, interviews with elderly weavers, and extensive footage of a festival celebrating the potato harvest. At the 14-minute mark, while Chen's camera panned across a crowd gathered in the village plaza, a woman moved through the left side of the frame. She appeared for 11 seconds, pregnant, visibly in her 3rd trimester, wearing a traditional Polera skirt in deep burgundy and a woven manta shawl. Her hair, dark and long, hung in a single braid down her back. She carried a clay pot balanced against her hip and exchanged words in Quechua with an older woman selling corn. Then she disappeared behind a stone building, and Chen's camera continued its sweep across the festival. The video accumulated 7,000 views in its first week. Standard performance for Chen's content. Nothing suggested it contained anything beyond documentary footage of Andean village life. On September 17th, 2021, 6 months after the video's upload, a comment appeared. User at Sarah Mitchell, find her. 1422. Background left side. That's Sarah. The account belonged to Jennifer Koss, Sarah's roommate from Oregon State. Koss had spent 18 months combing through social media, travel blogs, and video platforms, searching any content tagged with Peru, Lima, or Andes. She watched thousands of hours of footage, scanned tens of thousands of photographs uploaded by travelers. She had trained herself to look past the focal subjects, to study backgrounds, peripheral figures, blurred faces in distant crowds. At 1422 in Marcus Chen's village documentary, she found what international authorities, private investigators, and coordinated search efforts had failed to locate. Within 2 hours, Koss had contacted Sarah's parents, sent screenshots with a timestamp highlighted, and shared the link across every missing person network she'd built connections with over the previous year and a half. David and Patricia Mitchell watched the 11-second segment 47 times before calling the FBI liaison assigned to their daughter's case. The woman's face appeared in profile for perhaps 3 seconds total. The rest of the time she was angled away from the camera or partially obscured by other festival attendees. The footage quality was good. Chen shot in 4K, but the woman occupied maybe 5% of the frame, her features never in sharp focus. But Patricia Mitchell had memorized every angle of her daughter's face, the slope of her nose, the way she held her shoulders, the specific proportions of her profile. "That's Sarah," she told the FBI agent. "I know my daughter." The FBI's Forensic Image Analysis Unit received the footage on September 18th. They extracted the relevant frames, enhanced the resolution, isolated the woman's visible features, and ran comparative analysis against Sarah Mitchell's driver's license photo, passport photo, and approximately 200 personal photographs provided by her family. The preliminary assessment came back within 72 hours. Possible match, confidence level insufficient for definitive identification based on video quality and limited visible features, but sufficient to warrant follow-up investigation. The challenge: Chen's video provided no specific location beyond Peruvian Andes. His description mentioned a 3-hour drive from Cusco on unmarked roads, a village of approximately 200 people, no cellular service. He did not name the community. FBI reached out to Chen directly. He responded within 6 hours, cooperative but uncertain. He'd visited 7 different villages during that research trip. He thought the festival footage came from a community called Quechua, but he'd need to check his notes. His guide had handled navigation. He could provide GPS coordinates from his phone's location history. On September 23rd, Chen sent coordinates: 13.472 1 degrees south, 71.879 2 degrees west, a village named Quechua. Population estimated at 230. Located at 3,800 meters elevation in the Apurímac region. No paved road access. No municipal records digitized. 4 hours by vehicle from Cusco in dry season. Impassable during heavy rains. Peruvian National Police, working with FBI coordination, dispatched a team on September 27th. They brought printed photographs of Sarah Mitchell, her passport photo, a picture from her 21st birthday, was a family photo from Christmas 2019, 3 months before her disappearance. The police arrived in Quechua on September 28th, late afternoon, after the 4-hour drive deteriorated into 6 hours navigating washed-out sections of mountain track. They showed photographs to the village president, to the school teacher, to women selling vegetables in the small market. No one recognized the American girl in the photos. But when police described what they were looking for, a foreign woman, possibly arrived in the last 2 years, possibly pregnant, 3 separate villagers pointed to the same house. A small dwelling built from adobe brick and corrugated metal roofing. Situated at the village's eastern edge, backing against terraced fields. The woman who answered, the door was no longer pregnant. She held an infant, perhaps 3 months old, wrapped in a woven blanket. She was Sarah Mitchell. Dental records would later provide forensic confirmation. Fingerprints matched. A small scar above her left eyebrow, documented in her medical history from a childhood playground fall, was present. But the woman standing in the doorway of that adobe house did not recognize her own name. She spoke only Quechua. The Peruvian National Police team included an officer fluent in the language, Sergeant Marisol Huaman, who had grown up in a Quechua-speaking community 40 kilometers south. Huaman conducted the initial conversation, while her colleagues stood back, watching this woman who matched every identifying marker of Sarah Ann Mitchell, but carried herself as someone utterly different. "What is your name?" Huaman asked. "Sumaq." No hesitation. The word meant beautiful in Quechua. "Have you always lived here?" "Yes, this is my home. I was born here." "Do you know anyone named Sarah Mitchell?" Confusion crossed her face. She repeated the name slowly, testing the unfamiliar sounds. "No, I don't know this person." A man emerged from the house behind her, 32 years old, wearing work-worn cotton pants and a faded button shirt. He introduced himself as Tupac Quispe, Sumaq's husband. He positioned himself slightly in front of her, protective but not aggressive, asked why police were questioning his wife. Huaman explained carefully. A young woman from the United States had disappeared. Her family had been searching. There was reason to believe Sumaq might be this woman. Tupac's expression shifted through incomprehension to something close to anger. This is Sumaq. She is my wife. She has lived here all her life. You can ask anyone in this village. How long have you been married? 3 years. We married in 2019. Homan asked if he had documentation. Marriage certificate. Any official records? Tupac went inside, returned with a folded paper, worn at the creases from multiple handlings. A marriage certificate issued by the District Registry Office in Cusco, dated November 14th, 2019. 4 months before Sarah Mitchell's passport showed entry into Peru. 5 months before her disappearance from the Lima hostel. Homan photographed the document, asked more questions. When did they meet? How long had they known each other before marriage? Tupac's answers were consistent, detailed. They had known each other since childhood. Sumaq's family lived on the next ridge. She had moved to Quechua after their wedding, as was customary. Her parents had both died in the past year. She had no siblings. Can we speak with her alone? Homan asked. Tupac looked at Sumaq. She adjusted the infant in her arms, met his eyes, then nodded. They walked to the village school, empty in late afternoon, sat at desks built for children. Homan showed Sumaq the photographs. Sarah Mitchell's passport photo, her face younger, fuller, hair lighter. The unmistakable features of the woman sitting across from her. Sumaq studied the image with genuine curiosity, but no recognition. Who is she? Her family believes she is you. That is not me. I've never seen this person. Homan showed another photo. Sarah at her university graduation, wearing cap and gown, standing between David and Patricia Mitchell. Do you recognize anyone in this picture? Sumaq examined it carefully, shook her head. No. The woman in the center, you don't see any similarity to yourself. Sumaq looked again, a long pause. Perhaps the face is similar. But this is not me. I have never worn these clothes. I don't know these people. I have never been to this place. She handed the photo back. Why are you showing me pictures of strangers? Homan tried a different approach. Do you speak any English? What is English? The language spoken in the United States? In North America? No, I speak Quechua, some Spanish, a little, from school. Did you attend school here in Quechua? Until I was 13. Then I helped my mother with weaving. What is your earliest memory? Sumaq shifted the sleeping infant to her other arm, thought for a moment. Playing by the irrigation channel. I was maybe 3 years old. My mother was washing clothes and told me not to go near the water, but I wanted to catch the light reflecting on it. She smiled slightly at the memory. I slipped, fell in. My father pulled me out. The detail was specific, lived in, not the vague construction of someone inventing a past. What is your baby's name? Kusi. It means joy. How old is she? 12 weeks. Homan did the calculation. If the child was 12 weeks old now, end of September, she would have been born in early July, which meant Sumaq would have been visibly pregnant in March when Chen filmed the festival footage. The timing aligned. Did you attend the potato festival this year? In March? Yes, everyone attends. Do you remember anyone filming? A foreign man with a camera? Sumaq considered. Maybe. Sometimes tourists come for the festivals. I don't pay attention to them. Homan asked permission to take photographs of Sumaq for identification purposes to help resolve the confusion. Sumaq agreed, still cooperative, but increasingly uneasy. The police photographed her face from multiple angles, the scar above her left eyebrow, her hands, a small birthmark on her right shoulder that Patricia Mitchell had described in her missing person report. Every physical marker matched. But the woman in front of them had no connection to any life beyond these mountains. She held her daughter with the practiced ease of an experienced mother in a traditional community. She wore her clothing without self-consciousness, the polera skirt and hand-woven manta as natural to her as skin. She spoke Quechua with the fluid accent of a native speaker, not the careful pronunciation of an adult learner, but the unconscious rhythm of a first language. Huaman had worked missing person cases before. She had interviewed witnesses who lied, victims who concealed their identities to escape danger, people suffering from trauma-induced memory loss. This was different. Sumaq was not evasive. She was not performing. When she said she didn't recognize Sarah Mitchell's face in the photographs, Huaman believed her, which meant either this woman was not Sarah Mitchell, despite every physical identifier matching, or something had happened that erased not just memory, but identity itself. Before leaving the school, Huaman asked one more question. If I told you that your real name is Sarah, that you grew up in a place called Oregon, that you have a mother and father who have been searching for you for 18 months, would you want to know more? Sumaq looked down at her sleeping daughter. When she raised her eyes again, there was something close to pity in them. I think you are confused, she said gently. I am Sumaq Quispe. I was born in these mountains. This is where I belong. The village had no name that appeared on any map. Nestled at 11,000 feet in a narrow valley, accessible only by a deteriorating dirt track that became impassable during the rainy season, it existed in the kind of isolation that modernity had never quite penetrated. 73 residents, no cell service, no internet, electricity from a single diesel generator that ran 4 hours each evening. When Peruvian authorities arrived with Sarah's parents in late September 2021, they found a community that closed ranks immediately. The mayor, an elderly man named Don Artemio, who had led the village for 36 years, invited them into the stone community hall. He listened to their questions with patient courtesy, then delivered his answer through the interpreter with absolute certainty. Sumaq had been born there. She had grown up there. She had never left. Sarah's mother produced photographs on her phone. Birthday parties, high school graduation, family vacations. Don Artemio studied them politely, then shook his head. He did not recognize that girl. The woman they called Sumaq looked similar, yes. But the person in these photos lived a life that had nothing to do with their village. Then the elderly residents began emerging with their own photographs. The first was brought by an ancient woman named Doña Francisca. She unwrapped it carefully from layers of cloth, a faded color photograph, edges softened with age, showing a group of children outside the village school. The photo bore a date stamp, 1998. Doña Francisca's gnarled finger pointed to a girl in the back row, perhaps 3 years old, wearing a traditional embroidered vest. The face was small, features indistinct in the old photograph, but the resemblance was undeniable. Sarah Mitchell had been born in 2000. 3 more photographs surfaced over the next hour. A teenage girl helping with the potato harvest, dated 2010. A young woman at a village festival, dated 2015. Each image showed Sumaq at an age when Sarah Mitchell had verifiably been living in Oregon, attending American schools, posting to American social media accounts. The village secretary produced a ledger, a heavy handwritten record book dating back decades. There, in faded ink, was an entry from 2000. The birth of a daughter to Mateo and Elena. Deceased parents the villagers claimed had died in a landslide when Sumaq was 12. The handwriting was consistent with entries before and after. The paper showed appropriate aging. Authorities documented everything. They photographed the photographs. They scanned the ledger entries. They noted the consistency of the testimonies. the specificity of the memories the elderly villagers offered. How Sumaq had been a quiet child, always humming to herself. How she had learned weaving from her grandmother. How she had mourned her parents but had been cared for by the community. None of it should have been possible. Sarah's father asked to see the wedding certificate. Don Artemio retrieved it from the village archive. Another handwritten document, this one dated April 2019, recording the marriage of Sumaq to Martin Quispe, a farmer from the village. The ceremony, witnesses said, had been traditional. The entire village had attended. They remembered the feast. They remembered the music. Martin himself stood at the edge of the gathering, a quiet man in his 30s, weathered by altitude and labor. Through the interpreter, he described meeting Sumaq when they were teenagers. He spoke of a courtship that had lasted years. He showed them the small stone house they shared, the terraced fields they farmed together, the preparations he had made for their coming child. His confusion seemed genuine. He did not understand why these strangers were asking about a different life. His wife was Sumaq. She had always been Sumaq. The distress these outsiders were causing her, insisting she was someone else, showing her photographs of a foreign existence, was cruelty he struggled to comprehend. The authorities asked the villagers about March 2020. Did they remember anything unusual? Had Sumaq disappeared, even briefly? No, they said. She had been there. She had been pregnant by then, in her first trimester. She had been helping with the planting. They could describe her daily routine during those months with the kind of mundane detail that resisted invention. When investigators pressed, mentioned the Lima hostel, the locked room, the missing person report, the villagers exchanged glances that suggested they believed these outsiders might be insane. Lima was impossibly far away. Sumaq had never been to Lima. Why would she go to Lima? She belonged here, in the mountains, where her family had always lived. The village's conviction was absolute. It was not the rehearsed solidarity of people protecting a secret. It was the irritated patience of people stating obvious facts to those inexplicably unable to grasp them. 73 residents. Not one crack in the collective memory. Forensic analysis of the photographs would later prove inconclusive. The paper stock was consistent with locally available materials from the years indicated. The chemical composition of the ink suggested appropriate aging. The images showed no signs of digital manipulation, because they had never been digital. They were physical photographs produced by film cameras, printed in the pre-digital era when such verification methods did not yet exist. The ledger entries underwent similar scrutiny. The handwriting was consistent. The paper aging was correct. The binding showed decades of use. If these records had been fabricated, someone had done so with remarkable sophistication and foresight. The village offered one more piece of evidence. Doña Francisca, the ancient woman who had produced the first photograph, led the group to the village cemetery. Among the simple stone markers was a small memorial. Mateo and Elena died together in 2012. The dates matched the story. Villagers described the landslide. They showed where the old family house had stood before being reclaimed by the mountain. Sarah's mother began to weep, not from relief at finding her daughter alive, but from the dawning, impossible realization that she might be standing in a place where her daughter had somehow lived an entire parallel childhood, in a timeline that should not exist. The village had documents. It had photographs. It had unanimous testimony. It had a coherent, detailed history that contradicted everything the Mitchell family knew to be true. But that existed in the world with its own evidence, its own certainty, its own undeniable weight. The medical team assembled at Lima's Hospital Nacional could not agree on a diagnosis, but they agreed on one thing. Sarah Mitchell's Case violated established neurological frameworks. Dr. Carmen Ruiz, the lead neuropsychologist, spent 11 hours over 3 days conducting evaluations. Her report documented cognitive function in the 97th percentile. Sarah's intelligence was intact. Memory formation worked normally. Sarah could learn and recall new information without difficulty. Executive function showed no impairment. Personality assessment revealed a psychologically healthy individual, grounded in reality, with no markers for psychosis, schizophrenia, or delusional disorders. The problem was identity, or rather, the problem was that there was no problem. Sarah genuinely believed she was Sumaq. This was not a performance. Brain imaging during questioning showed none of the patterns associated with deception. No activation in the anterior cingulate cortex. No heightened activity in the prefrontal regions associated with cognitive effort. She was not trying to convince anyone of a false narrative. She was stating what she believed to be truth. Dissociative fugue state was the initial hypothesis. The condition, rare but documented, involves sudden, unexpected travel away from one's life, accompanied by amnesia for one's past and sometimes assumption of a new identity. Cases exist of people traveling hundreds of miles, establishing new lives, genuinely forgetting who they were. But dissociative fugue does not teach languages. Dr. Javier Mendoza, a linguistic specialist from the University of Lima, conducted the language assessment. Sarah spoke Quechua with complete fluency, not textbook Quechua, but the specific Cusco Colao dialect native to the southern highlands. Her pronunciation placed her within a 30-mile radius of where the village was located. She used colloquialisms that appeared in no teaching materials, grammatical constructions specific to that mountain region, vocabulary for agricultural practices that only someone raised in that environment would know. She spoke it with native unconscious competency. She dreamed in it. When startled, she exclaimed in it. When asked to count rapidly, she counted in Quechua without conscious thought. Dr. Mendoza's report was blunt. This level of linguistic integration requires childhood acquisition or years of immersive exposure. It cannot be achieved through trauma-induced dissociation. It cannot be achieved through any psychological process I can identify. Sarah spoke no English. When presented with written English, including her own handwriting from journals her parents provided, she could not read it. The alphabet was recognizable, she said, but the words meant nothing. Spanish she understood marginally, the way many rural Quechua speakers in Peru have passive comprehension from occasional contact with Spanish-speaking officials and traders. The linguistic erasure was total. The linguistic acquisition was complete. Both should have been impossible. Dental records removed any doubt about physical identity. The X-rays matched Sarah Mitchell's dental history perfectly, including a root canal from 2017 and the distinctive positioning of her wisdom teeth. DNA comparison with her parents showed definitive biological relationship. Fingerprints matched records from her Oregon driver's license. The body was Sarah Mitchell's. The mind inside it had no connection to that identity. Dr. Ruiz explored rarer neurological explanations. Retrograde amnesia from traumatic brain injury. But the MRI showed no evidence of trauma, no scarring, no indication of any head injury. Transient global amnesia. But that affects short-term memory formation and lasts hours, not months, and does not create false identities. Temporal lobe epilepsy with autobiographical memory disruption, but the EEG showed normal brainwave patterns. Psychogenic amnesia could, in extreme cases, erase large portions of identity following severe psychological trauma. But psychogenic amnesia does not implant complex false memories. It creates gaps. It leaves confusion. Sarah had no gaps. She had a complete, coherent life history that she could describe in extensive detail. Childhood in the village, her parents' death, her grandmother teaching her to weave, her courtship with Martin, the drought of 2018, the festival where Martin had first asked her to dance. She could describe the layout of the village with perfect accuracy. She could name every resident. She could explain farming techniques specific to that altitude. She knew which plants grew in which season. She knew songs that the elderly villagers recognized. She knew where to find medicinal herbs in the surrounding hillsides. This was not amnesia. This was knowledge. Dr. Ruiz interviewed her with photographs from Sarah's American life. Sarah studied them with polite interest the way anyone might look at pictures of strangers. "This girl looks happy," she said in Quechua, examining a photo of Sarah's high school prom. "I hope she had a good life." When shown her Oregon family, she felt sympathy, but no recognition. "They seem like kind people. I'm sorry they lost their daughter, but I'm not her." The psychological evaluation included tests designed to detect malingering. People faking amnesia tend to perform worse than genuine amnesia patients on certain tasks, overplaying cognitive difficulty. Sarah showed none of these patterns. She did not claim she couldn't remember things. She simply had no connection to the memories being presented. Dr. Ruiz administered the structured inventory of malingered symptomatology. Sarah scored in the range indicating genuine symptoms, not fabrication. The medical team considered fugue state variants, dissociative identity disorder, post-traumatic stress with identity fragmentation, culturally specific syndromes. Each diagnosis had elements that fit and critical elements that did not. On the fourth day of evaluation, Dr. Ruiz asked Sarah, through the Quechua interpreter, if she had dreams or flashes of another life, any fragments, any sense of disconnection from her memories. Sarah shook her head. "My memories are my memories. They're as solid to me as this chair. I don't understand why you're asking me to doubt what I know's real." The pregnancy added another layer. Ultrasound dated the fetus to approximately 16 weeks. Conception would have occurred in late May or early June 2021, at least 14 months after her Lima disappearance. The baby was healthy. Sarah's prenatal health was excellent, consistent with someone who had been receiving traditional community care throughout the pregnancy. If fugue state had occurred in March 2020, she had sustained that alternate identity for over 18 months by the time she was found. She had built a life, married, conceived, remained completely integrated into the village community without any reported episodes of confusion or identity break. Dr. Ruiz's final report ran 47 pages. Her conclusion was careful. The patient presents with complete retrograde amnesia for her previous identity, accompanied by comprehensive assumption of an alternate identity, including language acquisition and cultural integration, that cannot be explained by established dissociative disorder mechanisms. No neurological damage is evident. No deception is evident. Recommend ongoing monitoring and follow-up, but prognosis for recovery of original identity is extremely poor, for reasons I cannot adequately explain from a medical standpoint. Sarah Mitchell appears to have ceased to exist as a psychological entity, replaced entirely by the identity the patient calls Sumaq. In simpler terms, they could confirm who she was. They could not explain who she had become, or how, or why. The wedding certificate dated October 2019 demolished every assumption investigators had constructed about Sarah Mitchell's disappearance. If authentic, the document meant Sarah had married a Peruvian farmer 5 months before her parents received graduation photos from her Oregon University. 7 months before she boarded a flight to Lima. 16 months before she vanished from a locked hostel room. The Peruvian Civil Registry confirmed the certificate's legitimacy. The official seal, registration number, and witness signatures all checked against government records. The document had been filed in a provincial office 140 kilometers from the village, processed by a clerk who had since retired, but whose logs remained intact. Investigators reconstructed Sarah's final verified months in the United States. She had attended classes through December 2019. Her roommate confirmed her presence at a New Year's party. Bank records showed transactions in Portland through February 2020. Her parents had dinner with her 3 days before her departure for South America. The timeline allowed no space for a marriage ceremony in an Andean village. Unless Sarah Mitchell had lived two simultaneous lives. Unless she had somehow existed in both Oregon and Peru during the same months. Unless the fundamental assumptions about linear existence and singular identity were catastrophically wrong. Her father commissioned an independent analysis of the wedding certificate. The paper's chemical composition matched manufacturing batches from 2019. The ink showed appropriate aging. The clerk's signature matched samples from other documents processed during that period. 3 separate forensic document examiners found no evidence of forgery or backdating. The village priest who had officiated remembered the ceremony. He described details, the traditional dress Sumaq had worn, the specific hymns sung, the weather that afternoon. His parish records contained an entry dated October 17, 2019, listing a marriage between Sumaq Quispe and Luis Huaman. Luis, Sarah's husband, produced photographs from the wedding. Sumaq stood before a small stone church, wearing embroidered textiles, surrounded by villagers. The metadata embedded in the digital images confirmed an October 2019 creation date. The geological survey identified the specific mountain visible in the background. The exact position of shadows indicated mid-afternoon in that location during that month. Every technical analysis supported the impossible. Investigators pursued a desperate alternative theory. Perhaps Sarah had visited Peru earlier than her family realized. Perhaps a previous trip, unreported or forgotten, had resulted in this relationship. They scoured passport records. Sarah Mitchell's passport showed a single stamp, her March 2020 entry into Lima. No prior visits to South America. No unexplained absences from her documented American life. Her university registrar confirmed continuous enrollment. Her part-time job at a Portland bookstore had timesheets showing regular shifts through February 2020. Her phone's location data placed her in Oregon throughout 2019. Credit card. Transactions formed an unbroken pattern of American purchases. Groceries, gas, textbooks, coffee shops. The data allowed no room for extended absence. Sarah Mitchell had been consistently, verifiably present in the United States during the period she had supposedly been married in Peru. Authorities examined whether someone else had assumed Sumaq's identity for the ceremony, whether the wedding had involved a different woman, and Sarah had later been forced to take her place. But the photographs from 2019 showed the same face. Dental records confirmed the woman in those images was Sarah Mitchell, not a substitute or resemblance. The Peruvian investigation identified 12 villagers who claimed to have attended the October 2019 wedding. Each provided consistent accounts. The ceremony had lasted 2 hours, followed by a traditional celebration. They remembered specific details about food served, songs performed, which families had brought children. Their testimonies aligned with each other and with the priest's records. None showed signs of coached responses or coordinated deception. When interviewed separately, their stories maintained coherence without suspicious uniformity. They described the event with the casual imperfection of genuine memory, disagreeing on minor details while converging on essential facts. The village's collective memory extended further. Residents described seeing Sumaq in the months before the wedding, shopping in the weekly market, working in community gardens, attending Mass. Their accounts placed her in Peru throughout 2019, while every American record placed Sarah in Oregon. Investigators documented 73 separate data points confirming Sarah Mitchell's presence in the United States between January and December 2019. Simultaneously, they collected 41 witness testimonies, placing Sumaq in Peru during overlapping periods. The evidence did not contradict. It existed in parallel impossibility. Sarah's mother hired a private investigation firm specializing in identity fraud. They found no evidence of a twin, no adoption records suggesting separated siblings, no indication Sarah Mitchell had been anyone other than who her birth certificate claimed. Medical records from childhood showed consistent documentation. School photos traced her development year by year. There was no hidden history, no concealed origin. Yet somewhere in the Andes, a woman with Sarah's face, Sarah's DNA, and Sarah's dental records had built a life that predated the disappearance that should have created it. The woman who landed at Portland International Airport did not recognize rain. She pressed her face against the van window during the drive to her parents' house, watching water stream from a gray sky with visible confusion. Luis had explained she came from a place where water fell from above, but seeing it produced only disorientation, not recognition. Her parents had prepared her childhood bedroom, posters from high school still on the walls, swimming trophies on shelves, photographs documenting a life she studied like artifacts from an archaeological site. She moved through the space, touching objects, carefully, respectfully, as one might handle museum pieces. Nothing triggered memory. Nothing felt familiar. The first morning, they found her sitting in the backyard at dawn, facing east toward mountains that were not there. She had been crying. She ate nothing for 2 days. Her mother finally realized she was searching for foods that did not exist in suburban Oregon. The specific potatoes grown at high altitude, the particular grain preparations, the herbs that grew only in Andean valleys. American bread tasted wrong. The water tasted wrong. Everything carried a chemical artificiality that made her nauseous. They brought specialists to the house, psychologists, therapists, a linguistic expert in trauma-induced language disorders. She sat through evaluations with polite detachment, answering questions in halting Spanish, occasionally lapsing into Quechua when distressed. The English her parents remembered her speaking fluently remained completely inaccessible. A neuropsychologist spent 6 hours conducting memory tests. Sarah, the specialist, consciously used her American name, hoping repetition might anchor her. Could describe the Peruvian village in precise detail. She drew accurate maps of its streets, named 53 residents, explained the agricultural calendar and ritual practices. She recalled her wedding day with clarity, her pregnancy's progression, conversations with her husband from weeks before her forced departure. She remembered nothing before arriving in the village. When shown photographs of herself as a child, she examined them with detached interest. When her high school best friend visited, Sarah studied her face with visible effort, trying to manufacture recognition that would not come. The friend left in tears. The legal situation had no precedent. Sarah Mitchell was a 20-year-old American citizen with constitutional rights to freedom of movement, but the woman inhabiting Sarah Mitchell's body insisted she was being held against her will, that her name was Sumaq quispi huaman, that she had been taken from her home and husband by strangers who claimed biological ownership of her body. On day 6, they found her trying to access her parents' computer, laboriously typing search queries in phonetic Spanish. She was looking for flights to Lima. She had no money, no passport access, no means to execute the escape she was clearly planning. Her mother removed all keys from interior doors after discovering her testing each lock in the middle of the night. They hired a cultural mediator who spoke Quechua. For the first time since her arrival, Sarah engaged fully in conversation. She spoke rapidly, desperately, explaining that she needed to return before the rainy season, that Luis would be worried, that the community needed her for upcoming harvest rituals. Her pregnancy, she was 23 weeks, required the attention of the village midwife, who understood her body's patterns. The mediator gently explained that American medical care was superior, that the baby would be safer here. Sarah looked at her with something approaching fury. "My child belongs to the mountains," she said in Quechua. "You are drowning us both in this low, wet place." The mediator later told her parents that Sumaq's linguistic patterns indicated someone who had spoken Quechua from early childhood, not someone who had learned it as an adult. The grammatical structures, the reflexive vocabulary choices, the cultural references embedded in her speech, all suggested native fluency developed over years. On day 12, Sarah stopped resisting outwardly. She accepted the American clothes her mother bought. She sat through family dinners without protest. She watched television with blank patience. She took the prenatal vitamins, attended the medical appointments, allowed the examinations. Her parents interpreted this as acceptance, as the beginning of adjustment, as evidence that some deep part of her recognized home. The psychologist noted in her report that the behavior more closely resembled strategic compliance exhibited by prisoners awaiting opportunity. On day 17, Sarah asked to plant a garden in the backyard. Her father, relieved by the request's normalcy, bought vegetable seeds. She spent 3 afternoons working the soil, planting in patterns her parents did not recognize, but assumed reflected recovered memory. What she had actually planted were Andean crops from seeds she had been carrying in a small cloth bag since her extraction. Seeds that would never successfully grow in Portland's climate, but whose planting served as a ritual act, a promise to return. She began studying her parents when they thought she was resting, learning their schedules, their patterns, the household's rhythms, memorizing which doors they locked, which windows opened easily, where they kept money and documents. On day 19, her mother found her in Sarah's old bedroom, holding a framed photograph from high school graduation. For a moment, hope surged. Perhaps something had broken through. Perhaps memory was returning. "Who is she?" Sarah asked in Spanish, studying the image. "This girl who had my face?" On day 21, they woke to her absence. The note lay on the kitchen table, written in the flowing Quechua script she must have learned. As a child in a village, she had somehow never left while simultaneously growing up in Oregon. Her mother had it translated by 3 different experts before accepting they all provided the same rendering. "I'm going home." 3 weeks. That's how long Sarah Mitchell remained in the Oregon home where she'd grown up, surrounded by parents who'd searched 18 months for her, in rooms filled with photographs of a life she couldn't remember living. On the morning of April 12, 2022, her parents found her bedroom empty. No struggle, no broken window, just an absence that felt sickeningly familiar. Except this time, she'd left something behind. A single piece of paper on the neatly made bed, covered in flowing Quechua script. Her mother called the police immediately. While officers searched the surrounding neighborhoods, the Mitchell family contacted a linguistics professor at the University of Oregon who'd helped them communicate with Sarah during those 3 impossible weeks. The professor translated the note over the phone. 5 words in English. "I'm going home." The phrase carried a devastating finality. Not going back, not leaving. Home, a word that should have meant the house she'd just fled. The parents frantically searching for her. The childhood bedroom she'd slept in but didn't recognize. Instead, it meant a village 9,000 miles away, accessible only by rough mountain roads, where a farmer husband waited and a life as Sumaq continued without interruption. This time, authorities faced a different calculation. Sarah Mitchell was legally an adult. She hadn't been abducted. Security footage from Portland International Airport showed her boarding a flight to Lima alone, using her passport, moving with clear purpose. Peruvian authorities confirmed her arrival and eventual return to the Andean village. She had chosen to leave. The second search was brief, perfunctory. Within days, officials confirmed what everyone already understood. Sarah had returned to the village, to the man she called her husband, to the community that insisted she'd always belong there. Her parents faced an agonizing decision with no good options. They could attempt another extraction, potentially traumatizing their daughter further and forcing her from the only life she remembered. Or they could accept that the person they'd found wasn't the daughter they'd lost. That's Sarah. Mitchell existed now only in their memories and in official records, while Sumaq lived a complete, coherent life elsewhere. There would be no second retrieval, no legal battle, just another loss, somehow sharper than the first. Sarah Mitchell's case officially closed as resolved in May 2022. Located alive, identity confirmed, returned to country of origin, whereabouts known. But resolution implies answers. This case offers none. Start with the timeline, the foundation that refuses to hold. The wedding certificate places Sumaq's marriage in 2019, months before Sarah's official, March 2020 disappearance from Lima. If authentic, it shatters the entire sequence of events. Where was Sarah before Lima? Had she already vanished from her original life, living some unknown existence that nobody noticed? Or did she somehow maintain dual lives, Oregon college student and Andean villager, until the hostel room finally made her absence visible? The hostel itself raises questions. Why did she leave everything? Passport, phone, money, identification. If she intended to disappear, why not take documents that would facilitate travel? If she didn't intend to leave, what prompted her departure? The medical evaluations answered nothing. Dental records confirmed identity with absolute certainty, but offered no explanation for the transformation. No brain trauma, no evidence of deception, no conventional diagnosis that accounts for complete linguistic fluency in a language she'd never studied, or the wholesale replacement of one coherent identity with another. The village's testimony remains the deepest enigma. Elderly residents produced photographs, physical prints, not digital images easily manipulated, showing a girl they identified as Sumaq at various childhood ages. Background details matched: the village plaza, local festivals, architectural features unchanged over decades. Either an entire community constructed an elaborate false history, maintaining perfect consistency across dozens of independent witnesses, or those photographs document something that shouldn't be possible. Psychological experts suggested dissociative fugue states, rare conditions where individuals lose access to their past identity and create new ones. But fugue states don't typically produce fluent language acquisition or generate decades of corroborating physical evidence. They don't usually come with communities that remember the fugue identity's entire fictional childhood. Some researchers proposed more exotic explanations. Cryptomnesia, hidden memories surfacing from unknown earlier exposure. parallel identity formation in response to extreme psychological trauma. Even fringe theories involving quantum consciousness or timeline disruptions found audience among those seeking any framework that could contain the contradictions. None satisfy. Each explanation accounts for some elements while failing to address others. The case resists coherent narrative. What we're left with isn't a mystery to solve, but a phenomenon to witness. The complete, genuine transformation of one person into another, accompanied by evidence that suggests both identities might somehow be real, existing in spaces that shouldn't overlap. Sarah Mitchell remains a missing person to her family, even though they know exactly where she is. They lost a daughter, not to death or disappearance, but to an inexplicable metamorphosis that left her physically present, but fundamentally gone. Sumaq lives a complete life with no sense of loss, no void to fill. She returned home pregnant, gave birth to a daughter in late 2022, continues her life in the village that claims she never left. By all accounts, she's content, not recovering from trauma, not struggling with fragmented identity, simply being herself in the only world she remembers. The discomfort lies in that completeness. We're conditioned to believe identity persists, that the core self endures regardless of circumstance. Sarah's case suggests something more unsettling, that identity might be contingent, erasable, replaceable with something equally real and valid. Sarah Mitchell was found. The dental records proved it. The authorities confirmed it. Her parents held her in their arms again. And yet, Sarah Mitchell remains missing. She's officially closed in the databases, marked as located, no longer counted among the disappeared. But to the family in Oregon who raised her for 20 years, their daughter vanished twice. First from a Lima hostel, then from their suburban home with a note they couldn't read in a language she shouldn't know. Sumaq returned to her village, to her husband, to the life her mind insists is real. Two families claim the same woman. Both are right. Both have lost her. This case forces an impossible question. Can someone be missing from one life while being exactly where they belong in another?